Okay, let's talk about historical fact versus historical conclusion versus historical speculation versus opinion. So let's start with facts. Facts are things that can be proven to be true. They're ideas, they're statements that can be proven to be true. For example, Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president of the United States. That's a fact, you can prove it. Historical conclusions, on the other hand, are statements that are most likely true, but they are ideas and statements that professional historians or group of historians have come to based on the evidence that they've gathered and looked at. And most of the time, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that it's pretty sure that this statement is true, right? But I just want you to know that it's still just a conclusion, and it's still good to hold back a little doubt because there have been many times in the past, right, where later historians have gone back and updated the conclusions or theories of previous historians, of updated theories that were widely accepted by most professional historians, but they didn't have the same type of information. So, history is actually a changing, living discipline where every day, every year, there's always new information being gathered. Okay, and historical conclusions, again, let's go back to that metaphor of the elephant and the blind men, right? Historians, all they have are evidence from people who had limited perspectives. So their job is to connect all of that evidence. So the historical conclusions that they come to, it's actually like the key piece. It's what makes history, right? And that's why Mark Twain said that the very ink with which history is written is liquid prejudice. So just keep that in mind. That's historical conclusions are everywhere and they're probably most likely right, but they can still change and they deserve to be challenged. Historical speculation is more, it's a lot like historical conclusion, but there might be a group of historians that disagree, right? Because they interpret the evidence differently. So there's a lot more room for different opinions because there's just not enough evidence. So that would be more in the speculation realm where they're making these conclusions to the best of their abilities, the ones with integrity, the historians with integrity, um, and they put out a statement, a claim, because they have to connect the evidence somehow, right? Like, this is my best guess. This is what I think happened. But then you'll have another group of historians that will say, I disagree. I think it's actually this. Okay, so I think we can define or categorize something in the realm of historical speculation when it's just not, there's just not as much evidence for it. And then finally, historical opinion, it's kind of like where lots of historians and people just have very, very differing opinions about what happened because nobody really knows. There's not much evidence, or there's a lot of information, maybe, but evidence points to different directions. And maybe it's something that you can never really have one answer to. It will just be opinions. For example, you can say Elizabeth I was a great ruler, but then some people might have a different opinion where they'll say, actually, no, she's not so great because look at all the people that she persecuted, right? If you're looking at it specifically from that angle, or even like the presidency of uh, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, right? A lot of people will be like, oh, he's so great. He had these economic policies that gave people jobs. He led us through World War II, and he had such a great magnetic personality. But then some people might say, no, he was horrible. He put the Japanese in internment camps. So That's more of historical opinion there. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some examples to help us out. Okay, as an example, I want us to go ahead and look at the Britannica student article for monarchy. I'll leave you guys a link um, in the description down below. Um, and again, I'm reading the student level version. And if you look at this article, it's actually really great. Most of it is very much just facts. For example, it begins with the definition of a monarchy. A monarchy is a form of government that is based upon the undivided sovereignty or rule of a single person. Great, you can prove that, right? Like this is how people define the word monarchy, and this is the conditions around it. Okay, and then you look at the second paragraph. Several types of monarchies exist, including absolute monarchy and constitutional monarchy. Yes, that's correct. And they even give you the evidence for that. There's, okay, here are the two types, right? It's not just one type of monarchy. And then they go ahead and define and tell you where those monarchies are or have existed in the past and in the present day. So that's really great. That's all very much facts. And again, the third paragraph, monarchies have existed since people first started forming civilizations. In early times, some peoples, such as the ancient Egyptians, saw their monarchs as godlike or as actual gods. So there, they actually gave evidence for that first sentence. So you can pretty much say that's fact, right? This is what happened. There's evidence, you can prove it. Okay, but now I want you to look at the last paragraph. This is more of where there's a little bit more of interpretation, because the article will have to look at how people interpreted the monarchy and how people viewed the monarchy. So they'd have to gather a lot of evidence. And do you think all people had the same opinion? No, probably not, right? So here they have to make a conclusion. By the 1700s, however, more and more citizens had come to see monarchs not as divine rulers, but as brutal tyrants, and various opposition movements began to form. So there you see, like, it's not quite facts. They have a date, which may, or a set of years, which might throw us off, because usually when we think facts, we know there are very specific information. But here you can look at more of the shaded words, right? Brutal tyrants. That's something where someone can have an opinion, like what does brutal mean, right? And what is a tyrant? And you're going to need to have a lot of evidence for that. And then they're saying various movements, opposition movements, began to form. In 1776, for example, the people in the American colonies broke away from the British monarchy and formed a republic ruled by the people. Now, I want to pause there and say that, okay, maybe you can say, whoa, well, they gave an example or evidence that people saw monarchs as brutal tyrants because look, the American colonies broke away, right? But does that really logically connect? It's, if you look at it, if you look at the evidence that they give you, it's basically just saying in 1776 the people in the American colonies broke away and formed the republic. But is there evidence as to why? Does it say that they did that because they thought that King George III was a brutal tyrant? No, right? Really, this only serves as evidence to the last part of that sentence. The various opposition movements began to form, but it doesn't prove why. Okay, so just watch out for things like that. Just because there's a correlation, just because something happened, it doesn't mean it was caused by something else that was happening at the same time. That could just be correlation, where things are happening at the same time, but it doesn't mean that thing A caused thing B, event B. Okay, so just keep that in mind because you'll run into that a lot in your research. And ultimately, it's what you're going to have to do in this debate, right? You're going to have to make these connections and make them in a convincing way so that you can win over the judges. Okay, so good luck and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions.